So this video is basically all the finishing touches I'm putting on these two French doors, and that is going to start with some exterior molding that covers the seam between the two doors on the outside of the door. This is the only thing I bought online that I outsourced for this project, and it was mainly because I just didn't have enough lumber left in order to make it in the shop. But this type of molding is technically called a T-astragal molding. So it's that decorative molding that you just saw, but it has a spline down the middle that gets attached to the passive door. The passive door is going to be the one that stays in place. The other door, the active door, is going to be the one that you mainly use. The passive door can be open, but it locks in place. So I could only find this molding online in Sapile because it had to match. Without that extra bit to attach it to the door. So I bought this. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't necessarily expensive. I wish I had enough lumber to make it in the shop, but I just didn't. And I just cut a spline down the middle, and then I can attach a piece of mahogany because that's really all I had left in the shop for this build. It's a close enough match that I used it for a couple of little things left. And it's also probably the highest rated exterior wood out there. And as you can see, I just cut like about a 1/4 inch piece. I'm gonna have to join it in two sections because I don't have any longer stock in the shop. And that's how I made this piece that goes on the outside of the doors. So you can see I cleaned out that material. There's a little fin left, and I could just center that and then send it through. I sent this through off center on the table saw so that when I flip it around, it gives me a perfectly centered groove. There's that piece of molding fit into place. So like I said, the astragal molding is Sapile. The molding I'm using to turn it into T-astragal molding is mahogany. So then I had to put a 1/4 inch rabbet on the outside of this door, even though it's already put together. This was pretty easy without glass in them. They're not very heavy at all because they're pretty skinny doors. They're fitting into a custom space that there's a window there now that is going to come out, so they couldn't be super wide. And as you saw, I just put my dado stack in there. Like I said, this is about a 1/4 inch piece of material that needs to go in there, and I'm cutting a rabbet, so then that spline that's on that molding will set nicely in this edge. It will create a seam line edge, and then on the exterior side of the door is where that molding will be. It'll cover that seam. It's kind of a nice decorative element, and it will also keep bigger critters on the outside. Having these doors fully sealed is really important, not just for weather, but the things that live outside that you don't want inside. And then you could just see how that molding is going to fit into place. So the other element that had to be added to this is going to be what I'm using to seal off the threshold. This was pulled right from one of my books. It's what he uses. It's basically going to be an interlocking threshold. So there will be a piece of J channel that goes into a rabbet on the bottom of the door, and when the door is closed, you can see it locks in place with that decorative element that will go on the threshold. So on the bottom of both these doors, I have to cut, it was about a 3/8 inch rabbet, because from the front you won't be able to see this piece of metal, but it locks in place. So you're not going all the way through the door. To do this, very simple. I did it similarly to how I fitted the doors into the frame. I just had a straight edge clamp to the top of the door, and I just used a flush cut router bit in order to get the depth I needed. You can see I went about a 1/4 inch down with that bit, and then I could remove my template, or my fence technically, and then the bearing will now ride on that cut I just made, and I could continue down on the doors until I've gone down the depth. A lot of times I have all the links for this stuff I bought. It's all from different places. A lot of times, because I'm rushing on Friday to get this stuff uploaded, I forget to put links in place, but if someone reminds me in the comments if I forget, I can link all of this stuff. So you could see the threshold was really nice. I bought it to exact size, so I didn't have to cut it or anything. You could see how that fits on the threshold, and then that J hook that's on the bottom of the door, which like I said, you can't see from the front, which is nice, hooks into place so it won't let water in, and once again, just like the T-astrical molding, it's going to keep creatures out. So I just had that molding not permanently mounted onto the bottoms of the doors yet in place with some double-sided tape. I could close the doors, get a measurement for where that threshold has to be, and then I could just screw that into place. Now these doors look out of square, and that's because they are. Until this jamb goes into place, it rocks on me a little bit. So that's why it looks like there's no gap under the door anymore, but you can see how this interlocks into place. I'm really happy with that threshold. I think it's going to work really well in the space. And then after I cut those, I can now attach this molding. I didn't want to attach the molding until I had those rabbets cut. And you can see I'm just using, once again, epoxy. I epoxied the spline into place, and then I glued that decorative astragal molding on top of it. Now I'm putting this on oversized. This is going to be trimmed to the edge of the door, and once it's in place, because I have that rabbet cut for the molding, I'm going to have to probably trim a little bit off the top to get it to fit. Another little tip from the book is he takes 1 part epoxy to 1 part acetone and coats the bottoms of the doors anywhere where there's end grain with this. Because you're diluting it and making the solution more viscous, it actually absorbs all into the end grain, and that is how I decided to seal the bottoms and the tops of the doors. I also did this on all the end grain on the jamb. I don't really show finishing the jamb, but pretty much anywhere where I could put that, I put it. You want these as waterproof as possible. The finish coat I'm putting on this is, it was formerly called Seekins, but now it's called PPG. It was a finish that was recommended multiple times online. I don't remember reading about it in the book, but the author of the one book, David, that has Acorn Woodworks, he is all over forums, especially about making doors, and someone said that that's what he uses in his shop as well. It reminds me a lot of water locks, which I've used in the shop before. It's some sort of mix of varnish, and it was really simple to put on. I put on 3 coats, lightly sanded in between each coat, and I put that on everything. So then for the glass, I made this double insulated glass. I have a separate video of this on the channel, so I'm going to go through it very quickly, but it's basically going to be double pane glass. In between the panes is this foam Super Saver spacer that has desiccants in it, which will help remove moisture if any moisture happens to get into the frame. But ideally you are sealing this with the sealant that the company recommended. I don't know the exact makeup of it. It's some sort of silicone, and then air should not be able to get into that seal. The problem with fogging with these windows is air gets into the panes because the outside isn't sealed well, and then it will condensate because of the temperature changes in the home versus outside. Once I had those done, I can make the glass bead for this. Like I said, I am now out of sapele, so I did this with mahogany. This mahogany is fresh cut, so it's going to look a little bit lighter than it will after a couple months. I think once this mahogany oxidizes a little bit, it will be a closer match. It's not terrible now, but it's a little more orange than the sapele. But the person I'm making this for didn't mind, and that's what I had. So this glass bead molding, I'm just putting the same profile that I used on the door on this. Once I ripped that mahogany, it really twisted and contorted on me. There must have been a lot of tension in this lumber. You can see just how bent these pieces are. So I put a lot of clamps in place on the router table to keep this stuff as tight to the fence as possible, so I got consistent cuts. but it's basically just about roughly a half inch by half inch squares that I'm just going to put that profile on the outside edge, and then once I have the glass set in place, I can go through and add all of this on the outside. This molding is put in place on the inside with the intentions of it being able to be removable. So if you ever do happen to break a piece of glass, you can remove this molding and replace the glass fairly easily. You can see even with all of that stops and fences I have in place, I sent through all these pieces through about 3 times each because they were moving around on me quite a bit. But I ended up getting about 20 of these. I needed about 80 feet of this molding, and that kind of equaled about 20 of these strips. And I sealed all of those before I put everything in place, just so that all the sides were sealed. The sealant I'm using to set the glass in place is this Red Devil silicone. It's RTV silicone. Once again, a recommendation from the book. Before I put the glass in place, I put this anti-theft sealant on the outside, and I'm having some issues with some humidity trapped in between the frames. If you watch the short on this, I think people are being confused that there's moisture trapped in between the glass. There isn't. It's moisture in between that plastic I put on there and the top piece of the glass. Everything I've read online says that that's normal, and after a couple weeks it will dry. But so far I'm leaving all of the molding not permanently in place in case I have to peel that film off. But you can see I just used that RTV silicone to set everything in place. I sealed the top side, and then I could go through and add all these moldings. For the long verticals, I'm just cutting them square, and then I really didn't want to do this because I knew it would be a ton of work, but I knew it was the right way to do it. I went through and coped all of my corners. The reasons I decided to cope them is because in general, the corners on these are very square, so a lot of times you'll see people cope things when the corners aren't perfect 90s, because if you cut 245s, the corner's not a perfect 90, you're going to get a gap. But the other main reason to do it, especially in this circumstance, because it is an exterior door. The room that this is going in is a sunroom, and it has a mini split in it, but the mini split is only used when people are in the room. So this room is not super temperate, which means in my climate, in the summer there's going to be a high humidity situation. In the winter there's going to be a much lower humidity situation, and all of these parts are going to move. They're going to grow and shrink based on how much humidity is in the lumber. The cope joint is going to hide that movement because it overlaps the corners. If all of these were miters, especially now that there's more humidity in the air because we're approaching summer, come winter time, all those miters would open. This isn't as much of an issue if it's a paint grade material, because you can just caulk those things and paint over them. This isn't being caulked. You would see all of that movement. So I did spend the time coping all these corners. It's the proper way to do it. I don't cope stuff a lot because I'm not a trim carpenter, so my method was kind of using the tools I had in the shop. It's much faster in the shorts I upload of it, but in real life you can see it's a lot of going back and forth, removing little bits of material to get all of these to fit. Each door has 20 panes of glass, 4 corners, so I had to do this 80 times. But right now, both of the doors are essentially done. That is what the first one looks like, and then I just finished up doing all the copes on the second one today. You can see the streaks I'm talking about from that security film. So this was before doing the second door. On the passive door, before I put the glass in, this is a little out of place, but it made more sense to show the molding being cut and then installed. Before I installed all the glass and the moldings, I put these extension bolts on the passive door. So all I did was I just built up a really quick jig. It worked out nicely that I had half-inch ply that was the exact right dimension in order to get that 3/4 inch groove in the center of my door, and I just cut out that material. So at the bottom, this is showing the top. At the bottom I did the exact same thing, but once again where this bolt comes down is going to be where the threshold is. So I'm probably going to have to drill a hole in that threshold. That will all be done during the installation. So these were, they just set in place bolts. They have a curve at the top. So you could see I added a little bit of a shim because they're not at the top. It doesn't go all the way through to the thickness, but it was basically about 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch material I had to remove in order to get it to fit. I could remove that jig I made real quick. You could see how the top isn't as deep, and then that bolt fits into place. None of this stuff is permanently attached, because any exposed wood I have, I'm going to put that epoxy acetone mix in there just to make it more durable. Now, I believe they wanted you to use a 3/4 inch router, so you got the right radius at the top, a router bit. I didn't have that, so there is a little bit of a gap at the top, but that's fine. I could fill that and you won't even notice. And then this will lock that passive door in place. I happen to have this older style lock mortise set, and I'm kind of using bits and pieces of stuff in my shop and newer pieces in order to make it work. So this door is not a primary door. Like I said, it's on a sunroom, and it's basically being used as a fancier sliding glass door. So I don't want any sort of locks on the outside. It's only going to lock from the inside. So I'm repurposing this lock set. The skeleton key will work, but there won't be a skeleton key opening on the outside of the door. Once everything is in place, I'm most likely going to add a heavier duty deadbolt on it, but for now this will work fine. So I basically just had to put a very large mortise in the side of the door. If I had known this was what I was using when I started this door, I could have done this on my mortising machine. It would have been much easier. The router bit got me about halfway down, and then I just used a 5/8 inch spade bit and a chisel to remove the rest of the material. This goes pretty deep into the door, but that was basically how I did that. Once I got that to fit into place, I can mark where that faceplate is going to fit, because you have to remove about 1/8 inch of material on top of that as well. So then I just used a chisel to remove that, put some tape in place, because all of this stuff obviously has finish on it. And then, like I said, not a lot of material. Can just kind of whittle that material down. I could check to make sure I've gone far enough with that lock mortise turned upside down. Everything looked good, and I could slide. This is a nice fit. I could take it in and out. If your fit is too tight, you're going to have a really hard time getting this out. I know, because the door I took it out of, I kind of had to bend that faceplate a little bit. Then I just lined it up on the outside of the door and marked the holes. So the passive door is not going to have functioning knobs. It's just going to be knobs through the door. This is the only one that will have functioning knobs. They'll match, but I just had to add the skeleton keyhole on this as well. You'll be able to use the skeleton key from the inside. To avoid having to use it from the outside, I just didn't drill holes for it. So that's basically what this is. I had the hardware in the shop that's going to match the hardware that's coming, because I didn't have 4 knobs that matched, but it's basically going to be the exact same style knobs. So that is just making sure the skeleton key fits. The skeleton key has to go through the mortise box a little bit and into the other edge, so you could see I went a little bit deeper than I had to. The reason I don't want this skeleton key to open from the outside is just because you won't be using it, mainly just going to lock the door from the inside, but also because I didn't have a skeleton key for this lock, and you can buy them for $4 on Amazon. So if you have a skeleton key, they're designed for inside. If you have a skeleton key on an exterior door, anyone can go buy the replacements and unlock the door. So then I just once again made sure that fit, and then I hate it when my iPad does this. It is filming in the wrong portrait, but you can see the knob's going to work. The skeleton key is going to work, but once again, there will be a heavy duty locking on the outside. And I don't have the right face plates for the knobs. The ones I thought were going to work are actually 2 different size circles on the front there ever so slightly, but they have to match because they're both going on the exterior. But I could kind of prop it in place and you could see how the knob will go through on the other side. None of this stuff is permanently attached for the install. I'm keeping everything off to make my life a little bit easier. And like I said, this is where I'm at right now. It's been raining a lot. These are ready to be installed, minus the issue I'm having with the clear film on the top. So all of these copes are still loose. I just basically want to make sure that's going to clear up before I permanently attach those, because if I have to peel that film off, it's going to be much easier to do it without having to take all that molding off. This is just what that film looks like. So it was applied with soapy water and a squeegee, and like I said, everything I've read online is saying that that's just moisture, and when the sun hits it, it will dry up and clear up. But I'm not going to lie, I'm a little skeptical about that at this point. But that is these doors. There will be an installation video for this. I don't know when exactly that will be, just because the weather isn't super nice the next week. There's a lot of rain in the forecast. I want a couple clear days in the forecast before I do these.